Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Let's pretend for a brief moment that you're a therapist, and you don't have any assistant or secretary with you. So you're responsible for all the aspects of your business, including making appointments with clients. However, one day, you run into a small problem of sorts. The problem is that you accidentally booked two clients for the same day at the same time. This wasn't a case of one client misunderstanding what you meant or just coming at the wrong time. Both clients have text confirmations from you that they were set to come in at 1 o'clock. Obviously, that's not good. You can't conduct two therapy sessions at the same time. And even though this is a problem and is an embarrassing mistake, the stakes are relatively low, and you can figure out ways around it. You can ask one of the clients if they can come back at a different hour. You can rebook one of them and give them a discount or an extended session. You get the idea. At the end of the day, mistakenly booking two clients for the same time is not good. But it can happen, you can see how it could happen, and there are solutions around it to fix the problem. But what about an entire football team? What about, quite literally, scheduling two teams to play on the same day, completely by accident? Something like that seems like it shouldn't be possible, with how many people get involved, how many levels up the chain of command something like that has to go through, and with how publicized schedules are. And yet, in 1992, that's exactly what happened to the team that you've been watching, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Because on the opening day of the season, they were supposed to host the Baylor Bears in a non-conference matchup. Also on the opening day of the season, they were supposed to host the Indiana State Sycamores in a non-conference matchup. And let's just say that unlike Ray Parker Jr. and radio, they couldn't be in two places at the same time. Because being inside you and inside your mind is a heck of a lot easier and more feasible than playing two teams at once. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest scheduling controversies, not just in the more than 120-year history of the Oklahoma State football team, but quite possibly in the history of college football. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and the decision that they came to, we need some context to understand the state of Oklahoma State football, because it will help us understand why they made the call that they did when push came to shove. And as you can tell from the lowlights that you've been watching this whole time, in 1991, Oklahoma State was very, very bad. There were many things that had trouble adjusting from the second half of the 80s to the start of the 90s. Hair metal bands, the Soviet Union, and Oklahoma State football, as the era where they were constantly winning games and had Barry Sanders pulling up performances that we had never seen before and might never see again was long gone. Because in 1991, the Cowboys might have been the worst team in college football, as they went winless, posting an 0-10-1 season. It was their worst winning percentage of all time, and was the first time that they went winless in a season since 1920, when they went 0-7-1. For some perspective on how bad and almost unprecedented this season was for the Cowboys, the last time they went winless, that was the very first season of the National Football League, which was known as the American Professional Football Association. The New York Yankees had never played in the World Series before. The population of the world was under 2 billion, being at just under 5.5 billion in 1991. And there were 7.5 million cars in the United States, compared to 200 million in 1991. Bottom line, the world was a lot different the last time before 1991 that Oklahoma State had a winless season, as they were historically bad. And it's not hard to see why they struggled so much. Their offense was absolutely abysmal, averaging 9.6 points per game, and being held to 7 points or less in 7 of their 11 games. Only twice did they cross 15 points. Obviously, that's not going to win you too many football games. Whereas Oklahoma State just a few years ago was must-see television with how great their offense was, forcing someone to watch the 1991 installment of the team when they had the ball was punishable by 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. They had a starting quarterback in Kenny Ford, who finished the season completing just over 46% of his passes for 7 touchdowns and 18 interceptions. Now, college passer rating is a bit weird, but in the NFL, that comes out to a passer rating of 43.3. For some perspective, your passer rating, if you did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play, would be 39.6. So Ford was not even 4 points better than that. The team averaged less than 3 yards per carry, and scored 3 rushing touchdowns all season. Raphael Denson had 2, and Russell Berrien had 1. And that was it in terms of finding the end zone on the ground. The defense was your typical run-of-the-mill bad, although they were not helped by their anemic offense, which was one of the worst in the country. In fact, the only offense worse than Oklahoma State in 1991 was Minnesota, who averaged 9.5 points per game. For some even more perspective, just because I can't get over how bad this offense was, Fresno State played 12 games that season. If you took their highest point total of the year and their lowest point total of the year, and just eliminated the other 10 games and called them a forfeit, and said that they didn't score in any of them, the Bulldogs would have still scored more points in 1991 than the Cowboys did. Bottom line, Oklahoma State's season, especially offensively, was ugly with a capital U. And it's no surprise why outside of a 6-6 tie with Iowa State, they lost every single game that they played that season. They really put the offense in offense. So they wanted to start the 1992 season off on the right foot. But that was not going to be easy, because their first game was set to be against this team right here, the Baylor Bears out of the Southwest Conference. And in 1991, Baylor was an awfully good football team, finishing the year with an 8-4 record and making it to their first bowl game since 1986. Led by the legendary head coach Grant Haft, who made it known that the 1992 season would be his last before he retired, the Bears were even ranked inside the top 10 of the AP poll at one point, following a 5-0 start to their season, and they made it to the Copper Bowl thanks to beating 2 ranked opponents over the course of the season. Oklahoma State and Baylor set up a home-and-home, where Oklahoma State would host the 1992 installment, and Baylor would host the 1994 installment. It wasn't the first time that the teams would meet, but it was a rare occasion. They had only met 3 times since the end of World War II, hadn't played each other since 1983, when they met at the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl, and they hadn't played a home-and-home since 1972 and 1974. For the first time in 2 decades, the Bears would be coming to Stillwater, and would be opening up their season against the only team in Division 1A out of 107 teams to not win a game in 1991. There was just one small problem. There was just one teeny tiny problem that we haven't talked about yet. Because not only was Oklahoma State scheduled to play Baylor on September 5th, 1992 in their season opener, they were also scheduled to play Indiana State. Unfortunately, there's no footage available of the Sycamores from 1991, so enjoy some more footage of the Cowboys being completely inept in 1991 to truly highlight how bad and dysfunctional they were that season. Indiana State was a Division I AA school, so this was one of those guarantee games where one school pays another team to come in, with the expectation being that the home team will completely destroy them and get a confidence boost, with this game acting as a preseason game of sorts. It doesn't always work out that way, obviously, but that's the way it's supposed to work in theory, and you can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. On one hand, Indiana State went 5-6 the year before, and went 0-4 in road games, so it's not like inviting the Sycamores to your campus was the equivalent of inviting a team like North Dakota State today. On the other hand, the Sycamores played Kansas State in 1991 in a guarantee game, and a very good Kansas State team at that, seeing as they went 7-4, and they only lost by 1 point. So by no means was this a given, especially with how bad Oklahoma State was the previous season, as you can tell by literally all the footage that you've seen. But again, we have to remember throughout all of this, that Oklahoma State legitimately, and completely on accident, scheduled 2 teams for the same date. On September 5th, they were set to play both Baylor and Indiana State. Obviously, You can't do that. And outside of the fact that Oklahoma State couldn't win one game in 1991, let alone win two in one day, I don't think I need to go into the details of why you can't play two games on the same day against two different opponents, from a player safety perspective, a logistics perspective, and from literally every perspective in the world. This isn't baseball that we're talking about here. And now, because of this, the Cowboys found themselves in a massive pickle. Which game do we play? And who do we break the bad news to? There were pros and cons to playing both teams, with it basically coming down to what the Cowboys valued more, winning or money. If you played Baylor and canceled the game with Indiana State, the pro to that scenario is that you're way more likely to draw recognition and draw a better crowd. Crowds are better when you're playing a team in the same subdivision versus when you're playing what is generally considered to be a cupcake, and a game that could be over by halftime and just devolve into an exhibition. You play the game against Baylor, and not only that, but you could be shown on television, at the very least, regionally. However, the con to playing Baylor, especially after an 0-10-1 season, is that you're extremely likely to get curb stomped. You're starting the season off on the wrong foot. And especially after the 1991 season, where Oklahoma State had the third hardest strength of schedule in all of Division 1A, that might not be the best idea. Keep in mind that even though Oklahoma State was terrible in 1991, as you could tell if you had eyes, they had a brutal schedule. Of their 11 opponents, 9 of them ended the season with a winning record. 6 of them were ranked at some point, and 5 of them made it to a bowl game, including the national champion Miami Hurricanes. Combined, their opponents had a record of 80-42-4, winning over 65% of their games. And with the 1992 schedule looking brutal on paper, including a game at Michigan 2 weeks from September 5th against a team that was number 6 in the preseason poll, maybe scheduling a tough opponent wasn't the best idea. If you played Indiana State, the inverse happens. Money-wise, you're going to take a hit. You don't necessarily have to pay Baylor to come to Stillwater, but you do have to pay the Sycamores. That's how a lot of these Division I AA opponents make their money. You're going to take a hit when it comes to ticket sales, because the sales for a game against the Sycamores will be way lower than a game against the Bears. Plus, down the road, canceling against Baylor might have significantly worse ramifications than canceling against Indiana State. You cancel on the Sycamores, and even if you burn that bridge forever, there are tons of other Division I AA schools that you can go to that will take you up on that offer. If you cancel on Baylor, however, that could be a very costly bridge to burn. The 1994 game that you have scheduled against them, that could be gone. Future opportunities at a home and home, kiss them goodbye. And it could definitely lead to a scenario where Baylor says they won't play in a bowl game if it's against Oklahoma State, forcing bowl organizers in a pickle and potentially limiting your opportunities there. However, the pro is that you have a much better chance at winning, and that's kind of the most important thing after going winless the year before. This was an Oklahoma State team that hadn't won a game since November 17, 1990. This was a group of underclassmen that had no idea what it was like to win. You can start the season off on the right foot. And with that in mind, in January of 1992, just under 9 months before opening day, Oklahoma State decided to solve this little pickle of theirs by calling up Baylor and canceling their game against them. We have no clue how a problem like this even happened, where you can just schedule 2 games for the same day, and little information is known about how that came to be. However, when push came to shove, the Cowboys chose the Sycamores over the Bears. And amazingly enough, when Baylor head coach Grant Taft got the news, he was surprisingly okay with it. Seriously, this is not a bait and switch. He was more than understanding and accommodating of the situation, partly because it now allowed him to schedule a home game against Louisiana Tech for that date, and partly because, apparently, he did the same thing one time, where he scheduled Oklahoma and LSU on the same day. As Taft jokingly said on that in light of the Oklahoma State incident, actually, it might have been interesting to see if we could have gotten away from Oklahoma City in time for a night game in Baton Rouge, the first college football doubleheader. So Baylor was more than accommodating in a surprising twist, and the 1994 game between the two schools was still on. No harm, no foul. And at least when it came to the perspective of winning the game, Oklahoma State absolutely made the right call in playing Indiana State, as they got their first win in 22 months, winning 35-3, thanks to a 110-yard, 2-touchdown performance by running back Raphael Denson, and thanks to 4 rushing touchdowns by the team, which was more than they had in all of 1991 combined. Even if it was against a Division I AA opponent, when you went winless the year before, you'll take all the help you can get, and you don't care where the wins come from. Still, even a 32-point victory against a 1AA opponent could not come easy, considering the nightmare that it was to book this game in the first place, and the nightmare that came from scheduling 2 teams at once. Because if there was any incident that showcased the awful state of Oklahoma State football in the early 90s, look no further than September 5th, 1992, when even though they won, thanks to this entire debacle, they still found a way to lose. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.